I never thought owning a few acres of quiet land would turn into a full-blown legal war. But the moment I told my neighbor she couldn't step onto my ranch without permission, she decided to make my life hell. What she didn't know was that I'd spent 30 years in a courtroom. And when the HOA got involved, turning her personal vendetta into a community crusade, I knew exactly how to end it. The only question was, how far would she go before realizing she picked the wrong person to mess with? For years, I thought I'd found peace. My ranch sat at the far edge of the subdivision, acres of golden grass rolling beneath the morning sun, fences I'd built by hand, and a small stable for my 2 horses. It wasn't the kind of property you'd expect to be tangled in HOA drama. The board rarely bothered me, and I liked it that way. I was retired, living quietly, enjoying my mornings with coffee and the sound of wind through the fields. My neighbors mostly kept to themselves, except one. Her name was Karen. She moved in a few houses down about 2 years ago, bringing with her the unmistakable sound of chaos, complaints, gossip, and rules. Within weeks, she was attending every HOA meeting, correcting people about lawn lengths and trash bins, slowly climbing her way into power. I stayed out of it, until the day she wandered onto my land. It started innocently enough, or so I thought. One afternoon, I saw her walking along my fence line, clipboard in hand, jotting something down. I walked out and asked what she was doing. She smiled that tight, polite smile and said she was just checking for boundary compliance. I laughed, thinking she was joking. She wasn't. A week later, I got an HOA notice about unauthorized fencing that allegedly extended beyond my property line, a claim that was, of course, completely false. I ignored it at first, figuring it was a clerical mistake. But another letter came, then another, each one more aggressive than the last. That's when I realized this wasn't about property. It was about control. Soon the HOA started harassing me. Fines for improper landscaping, warnings for my barn's paint color, and letters accusing me of non-compliance with neighborhood aesthetics. Every one of them had Karen's fingerprints on it. I tried reasoning with the board, explaining that my land wasn't even fully under their jurisdiction. Half of it predated the HOA formation. But logic didn't matter when the self-appointed queen of rules was whispering in their ears. I could feel her eyes on me whenever I worked outside. She'd take photos from her driveway, stop by unannounced, and even tried to lecture me about community standards. It was laughable until she stepped over the line, literally and legally. One morning, I found her inside my fence, clipboard again in hand, snapping photos of my stable. I told her, calmly but firmly, to leave my property immediately. She refused, claiming she had HOA authority to inspect it. That's when I reminded her, trespassing is a criminal offense. I had the whole exchange recorded on my security cameras. She stormed off, threatening to take this to the board. I didn't think much of it. But 2 weeks later, a sheriff's deputy showed up at my door with a lawsuit. Karen was suing me for restricting HOA access and creating a hostile environment. The irony was almost funny. Almost. I spent my life as a lawyer. I knew intimidation when I saw it. And this was amateur hour. Still, I let the process play out. The HOA backed her, of course, thinking I'd roll over to avoid the trouble. They underestimated how prepared I was. I gathered every document, every recording, every petty letter she'd sent. I filed a counterclaim for harassment, trespassing, and defamation. The board tried to pressure me into mediation, but I refused. They wanted to play legal games? Fine. I'd give them a front row seat to what real litigation looked like. As the court date approached, Karen's confidence only grew. She strutted through the neighborhood like a peacock, bragging that she was about to teach me a lesson. The HOA even circulated a memo reminding residents about community cooperation, subtle code for siding against me. It was pathetic. Neighbors stopped waving. People whispered, but I stayed quiet. I'd spent too many years watching people destroy themselves with arrogance. I knew patience was my weapon, and Karen was about to hand me everything I needed. The day of the hearing, she arrived with her new HOA attorney, some young associate clearly thrilled to be handling a community case. They were smiling, laughing, certain they had the upper hand. I sat there calmly watching, waiting. When the judge entered, the room fell silent. Karen went first, launching into a dramatic monologue about non-compliance and aggressive behavior. Her attorney handed over photos, the same ones she took while trespassing. When my turn came, I didn't raise my voice once. I simply asked the court clerk to play a short video clip from my security footage. The footage showed Karen stepping onto my property, ignoring my repeated requests to leave and threatening me with HOA authority. You could hear her voice clearly. The courtroom shifted. Her attorney froze. I followed up with documentation proving that my ranch's back portion was outside HOA jurisdiction entirely, something any competent board should have known. Then I presented copies of every letter she sent, highlighting her personal bias and misuse of position. By the time I finished, the judge looked directly at her and said the words I'd been waiting for. This is a civil harassment case, not an HOA violation. The lawsuit was dismissed on the spot, and my counterclaim was approved to proceed. That was the turning point. The same people who once looked at me like an outcast suddenly avoided eye contact with her. The HOA board called an emergency meeting to review procedural boundaries. Karen tried to save face, claiming it was all a misunderstanding, but the evidence spoke for itself. When my attorney, yes, I hired one just to make the statement, filed for damages and attorney's fees, the message was loud and clear. I wasn't the one to mess with. In the weeks that followed, the atmosphere in the neighborhood changed. The HOA issued a formal apology and quietly removed Karen from her committee position. She sold her house 3 months later. No one missed her. As for me, I went back to my quiet life, mornings with coffee, evenings with the sound of wind through the pastures. But I'd be lying if I said it didn't leave a mark. There's something about being targeted in your own home that changes you. It makes you appreciate the peace you once took for granted, and reminds you how fragile that peace really is. Looking back, I don't regret standing up for myself. Most people would have backed down just to make the noise stop. But I've seen what happens when bullies go unchecked. They grow bolder. The HOA system works only when people demand fairness, not fear. Karen thought the rules gave her power. What she never understood was that the law protects those who know how to use it. In the end, she lost more than a case. She lost the illusion of control she'd built her entire identity around. Sometimes justice doesn't come from shouting or fighting. It comes from patience, evidence, and letting the truth speak louder than pride. I didn't just win a lawsuit, I reclaimed my peace. And if there's one thing I learned through it all, it's this. When someone tries to weaponize authority against you, stay calm, stay smart. And never forget, the truth is the strongest defense you'll ever have.